Good morning, everyone. Welcome to Sustainable CT's webinar on Action 9.1 about recycling. It's great to see you all here. We are recording this webinar so others can listen in later on. And we'll just start with some quick introductions. I'm Lynn Stoddard with Sustainable CT, my partner here.
Morning, folks. Corin Rather-Choney here, Program Assistant for Sustainable CT. Glad to see you all.
And we're going to be hearing from Jen Weymouth with Department of Energy and Environmental Protection in the Materials Management section, and Ginny Walton, the Recycling Coordinator for Mansfield, Connecticut. So before we jump into the details, thank you all for coming. I'm just going to assume you know a little bit about Sustainable CT. If not, we'll put some emails and whatnot in the chat so you can learn more. We're going to leave plenty of time for questions and answers today. But I did want to mention that we're moving towards our big certification submission deadline in the end of August for 2022 certification for Sustainable CT. And the recycling and waste management actions are part of category 9, of which each town has to do at least one action in each category to get certified. And this year we are in our pilot year of an exciting new program called Climate Leaders. And this action 9.1.1, which is reviewing materials management data, and 9.1.2, reducing your residential waste generated disposed per capita, are both eligible for points towards certification and towards the Climate Leaders program. So that's an exciting new program. If you have any questions about it, we'd love to share more. And we've done lots of webinars in the climate series. You can find it on our website. And we also have our, we have 12 fellows working all summer. These are students, college students that are fabulous and trained up in Sustainable CT, and they are working through the 9 councils of governments and available, as is our team, to help towns as they work towards registering for Sustainable CT or submitting towards for certification in August, or submitting for climate leader designation. And I think I might have seen one fellow in the list at least. So maybe, actually, yeah. Do any of the fellows just want to come off of mute? So we can, and just quickly introduce yourselves and tell us what COG you're from. Adrienne, how about we start with you?
Of course. Yeah. Good morning, everyone. My name is Adrienne Huck, and I am a Sustainable CT Fellow at NVCOG, and I'm originally from Derby, Connecticut, and I'm a rising junior at Tufts University.
Excellent. Thanks. Liam.
Hello, I'm Liam. I'm a fellow at RiverCog, and yes, I'm a rising senior at Connecticut College.
Excellent. Serena.
Hi, everyone. My name is Serena. I'm working at NHCOG this summer, and I'm a rising junior at Wesleyan.
Great. Hey, Lily. You want to say hello?
Hi, I'm Lily. I'm a rising junior at UConn, and I'm working at WestCog.
Great. Haley, hello.
Hi, everyone. I'm a rising junior at UConn, and I'm working at NECOG this summer.
Excellent. And Liam, another Liam.
Hi, everyone. I'm Liam. I'm a senior at UConn and working at WestCog.
Okay. And Quinn.
Hi, everyone. I'm Quinn. I'm working at MetroCog, and I'm a rising senior at Wake Forest University.
Excellent. So these are the amazing fellows who can provide lots of support for all the towns this summer. And if you want to get in touch with them, maybe each of them can just put their emails in the chat. If you're in that respective COG region, you can feel free to reach out. You can always reach us at info@sustainablecT.org for any information or contacts. And with that, I think I'm going to turn it over to Jen Weymouth, who is an amazing contribution and partner to Sustainable CT, as is all of DEEP, and really helpful with the materials management actions. So, and a longtime friend. We actually overlapped at DEEP for a little while. So it's great to have you on, Jen. Thanks so much for coming today.
Awesome. I'm going to share screen. Thank you, Lynn. Thank you, Torin. It's really exciting to be here. We're happy to be working with Sustainable CT on helping communities calculate their baseline for solid waste metrics, because we really believe that you can't improve what you don't measure. So we're going to talk a little bit today. Let me make sure everyone can see my screen. Just nod. Yes. Okay, great.
Yes, we can.
So today we're going to talk about the importance of calculating your per capita disposal. We're going to walk through action 9.1. We'll hear from Ginny Walton in Mansfield and get her perspective on why calculating per capita disposal is valuable to her town. And then we will do kind of like a live walkthrough of using the 9.1 worksheet with real municipal data. And all throughout today, it would be really helpful if you just kind of ask questions as we go. And I'll look to Torin and Lynn in case anything comes up in the chat that I miss. Just feel free, especially if it's the right time, just feel free to bring that up. I'm happy to be interrupted and answer questions. And then we'll go over a couple frequently asked questions that I've been getting a lot from municipalities as we're providing technical assistance and they're calculating their per capita disposal. So I noticed that there are a lot of folks that are maybe new to the industry, so it might be helpful to just kind of go through a couple of basics, a little bit of the basics. So it's really more important than ever for municipalities to look at implementing programs that will help you reduce waste and reduce costs. Most of you are aware of the waste crisis. It's been in the news quite a bit lately. However, it's been brewing for a while now. Connecticut's capacity is decreasing. We have 5 waste energy facilities in the state. Wallingford facility shut down within the last several years. Mira facility is planning on shutting down their waste to energy facility this summer. And then all of our other facilities are aging and subject to frequent shutdowns. The regional landfill capacity is also decreasing. Landfill capacity is going to be shrinking by 40% in the next 5 years, and Rhode Island has their landfill facility has a limited life. So we're looking at a huge strain on capacity for towns and residents, leading to these increased costs. And we're looking at a tipping fee for trash that might reach $145 per ton by 2030. And so this is putting a lot of pressure on towns and cities. But I did want to mention that we've been working, the Sustainable Materials Management Program at DEP has been working for many years now on helping municipalities save money, reduce trash, increase recycling. And in September of 2020, DEEP and over 96 municipalities convened to develop a menu of options to scale sustainable materials management solutions and to reduce reliance on landfills and waste energy. So we had many working groups on different topics, such as increasing recycling, unit-based pricing, food scraps and organics, and extended producer responsibility. If you're not aware of these meetings, we're kind of reconvening tomorrow at 2 o'clock, and you can register by using the link below or just going to our website and searching for CCSMM, Connecticut Coalition for Sustainable Materials Management. But really why we're here today is to talk about annual per capita disposal and calculating that metric and why is that metric really important to municipalities. So it's really helpful because, annual per capita disposal looks at how much residents are disposing on average within a municipality. And calculating your baseline is really the first step to tracking and improving your program. It allows you to compare the effectiveness of different waste reduction and diversion programs. So again, it's really the first step, and it's the best method to benchmark your progress, and it normalizes the disposal data so you can compare community to community. And even better, it earns you sustainable CT points. So, you know, there are challenges. Sometimes it is challenging to dig down to get the actual data and to find a reliable source. But what we want to just what we understand is that we dig down as best as we can, and the numbers will be normalized, and so we'll be able to get that baseline for each community, and we can provide technical assistance as well if you are struggling to get that data. I'm going to skip this for a second and just kind of work through a couple of the charts that I wanted to include. So over the last 6 or 7 years now, our consultant, Waste Zero, has been tracking and calculating per capita disposal for 40 or so communities. And we've got them listed here. I don't expect you to be able to read all that tiny text at the bottom, but just know that we were able to dig into these 40 communities and get their data and calculate their per capita. And we were able to use that data to then show the average in Connecticut is about 740 pounds per person per year. I'm realizing my chart does not have a label for the y-axis, so I will fix that. And you'll notice too, we have a couple of towns all the way on the right for Worcester, Massachusetts, and Portland, Maine, just as to show that we can compare communities in our state, and we can compare communities across the country with this kind of metric. I'll show you Massachusetts. Massachusetts also uses, but they actually use a pounds per household, which is slightly different. It's not as sensitive to change when you're testing out a new program. So that's why we like to use per capita or per person. And also for Massachusetts using the per household, we know that per household figures can vary between towns. So anywhere from 2.4 to 2.8 household persons per household. So it does provide a little bit of variability. And again, it's not as sensitive. So we like to use per capita or per person. This again is just an illustration to show that we can compare communities across the country using that pounds per capita waste disposal metric. And I can just walk through this quickly. This is something that we track. The data comes from the Institute for Local Self-Reliance and Waste Zero. The communities listed in red provide a certain 64-gallon overflow cart, and their average is about 646 pounds per capita. But when you provide pay-as-you-throw with variable carts and no curbside food collection, you drop that average down to about 560 pounds per capita. And then when you add food waste to the carts, it drops it down again to 510 pounds per capita. And the best program that we're seeing across the country right now is pay-as-you-throw with bags. At about 344 pounds per capita. If you add food waste to that, you're going to reduce down to the 200s, 250 or so. So again, just a little visual to kind of illustrate how important it is to be able to calculate your pounds per capita disposal and then be able to track that as you implement different programs. And I'll just go quickly back to this slide just to share that the state, we do use other metrics to help measure progress with and provide a full picture for state and municipal programs. We look at waste characterizations. In 2010 and 2015, The state conducted 2 statewide solid waste composition studies, and we intend to perform one every 5 to 10 years. And really, waste characterizations help us to understand what's left in the trash. And it's useful for planning and implementation of future waste reduction and reuse and recycling programs. We still look at recycling rates as well, but we just know that it's difficult to compare apples to apples because each municipality may collect different materials such as textiles or scrap metal, and it's really difficult to compare that across the board. So let's move on. So I'm going to quickly walk through action 9.1. And then I'll turn it over to Ginny for just a couple of minutes from a municipal perspective. Sustainable CT's action 9.1 is divided into 2 parts, 2 steps. The first step is reviewing materials management data, and that can earn you 5 points. And there's 3 requirements under this first category here. The first is to identify a municipal contact responsible for collecting and reporting data to DEEP. And that's really important because we need to make sure that we're, following the statute, which requires that municipalities submit an annual report to DEEP. And then a second requirement is to actually calculate the residential solid waste disposed per capita for 2 of the last 3 years. And that's something that we're going to do towards the end of the morning here. We'll walk through that and we'll answer questions. And then the third requirement is to make 2 years of data publicly available for residential solid waste disposed. And I'm going to show a couple examples of that on the next slide. We want to make sure that the per capita disposed is available to the public and not just waste disposal tonnages. We want to make sure that the actual metric per capita disposed is on your website somewhere or posted on Facebook or somehow made public so that they can. It's part of kind of like that initial education piece. The second component of action 9.1 is to reduce residential solid waste disposed per capita by at least 10% within the last 5 years. And this is a great one because each 10% that you reduce, you earn up 10 points. So you can earn up to 100 points for this action. And the Sustainable Materials Management team at DEP can help you identify actions that you could implement. And we also have lots of options outlined in the Connecticut CCSMM report that I had mentioned earlier. And so I will note, though, that pay-as-you-throw or unit-based pricing will get you the biggest bang for the buck, in case you haven't heard us talk about that before. I know many of you have. So I'm just going to quickly show you a couple municipal examples of how they publicize their data. This is Washington, Connecticut, and they provided a chart of municipal solid waste and recycling and electronics and their population. Here they don't provide the per capita, unless I didn't copy this correctly, and maybe it's down a little bit lower. I'm sorry, I will check that out. But I guess this is just a good example of making sure to include that per capita disposal metric whenever you publicize your data. And then here's an example from Mansfield, and they talk about in fiscal year 2019, the amount of waste made that year per person was 468 pounds. And then they talk about how in 21, it rose to 502 pounds per person per year. And I like how they do this call to action. It's really nice. They're pretty advanced in Mansfield. So I think that's really what I wanted to share initially. The meat and potatoes are going to be walking through the spreadsheet and the worksheet that's part of, I'm going to stop share here. the action. So I'm going to turn it over to Ginny really quickly so she can kind of share with you, why does Mansfield calculate per capita disposal? And, how is it valuable to her municipality? So Ginny, I'm going to mute and turn it over to you.
Thank you, Jen. And thank you for inviting me to be here. Could I share some spreadsheets? Is that all right for me to share screen? Okay. All right. So let me, are you seeing my Zoom link or the spreadsheet? The spreadsheet?
We see the spreadsheet.
Okay, good. So I'm just showing you the spreadsheet because I've been tracking recycling and trash data for the single family service, multifamily service, transfer station, schools, and this is metals from the transfer station. So that's single stream. And then the trash from single family, multifamily, transfer station, town buildings, schools. So, and I've been doing that since the early 90s. So I have a lot of data. And in this column here are the recycling rates. So I'm still continuing to do that. And that is informative and useful. I also have on this sheet here, it broken out like what is the single family recycling rate, multifamily recycling rate, and transfer station. You can see the transfer station's high because not only are we accepting residential trash and recycling, we're accepting mattresses and paint and single stream and an array of other things. So that is going to be higher. But to speak to the per capita figure, that really started with sustainable CT and also DEP asking for per capita information when we're reporting out on our recycling information at the end of the year. So I've been tracking that for the past few years since 2019. And the way that is useful in addition to the recycling rate is that if there are going to be any changes in the future, when one of the things that I'm hoping that we will do in the future, in the not too distant future, I hope, is to add composting collection to our pay-as-you-throw service. And so having the baseline of per capita waste production will help me to see is composting driving down that, which I absolutely anticipate that it will. The pitfalls with the recycling rate is that it doesn't tell me if the waste amount, if the recycling rate is like in the mid 30s, it's not telling me if the trash quantity is going up over time. And what I'm seeing from the per capita rate is that our waste generation in this town is going up, and that's with pay-as-you-throw service. So it's now 500. It was a little bit under 500 per capita, and there's a lot of things at play, like our multifamily residences are increasing in town over time, so that can also affect the recycling rates and the per capita. The per capita indicators, the population size includes the University of Connecticut, which I don't have any jurisdiction over. So, I mean, there's some things that are skewed, but nonetheless, it's a baseline, it's a constant, so that I get to compare something that is constant to itself later on. And for public notices, I also like that Sustainable CT does ask us to notify residents of that publicly. It gives them a frame of reference as well. So we've publicized it not only on the website, as you saw, but also in a town newsletter that we have. And every quarter we go out to bill residents for their service. So it's also been in the emails and inserts that we've sent out to residents. So thank you to the forward-thinking DEP and Sustainable CT for assisting us in moving in that direction. Thanks. I'll turn it over to you, Jen.
Thanks, Jenny. That's helpful. And you are in a tricky situation with all of your multifamily homes. And I know we've had lots of conversations with that between you and I and with our consultant. And so there are absolutely situations that come up and that kind of like challenge us to figure out how to best calculate and how to best represent the most common denominator of your residentially generated trash. And Ginny just happens to be one of them. Thank you. I'm gonna share screen, and I'm gonna walk us through calculating for one of the communities that I do have some data for. One of the other things I just wanted to say was, really quickly, calculating your per capita disposal is kind of the first step. And I'm glad it's part of this climate leaders designation category, because it's really the first step to making other changes to your solid waste program and earning more points through sustainable CT using, either 9.2, which is implementing unit-based pricing or pay-as-you-throw programs, 9.3, which is, recycling or composting additional materials, and then 9.4, which is, implementing a food waste prevention campaign. So getting this baseline is really helpful to be able to track the success and effectiveness of future programs. So let me share screen here. Okay, and let me get out of this. Okay, and all right, so please let me know, speak up if this is not easy to read. If you need me to make it bigger or smaller, let me know. I think that many of you are probably familiar with this worksheet. This is the worksheet for 9.1. The worksheet for 9.2 is very similar, and actually Torrin and I have a conversation scheduled to talk about potentially merging the two worksheets because they're so similar. I think it would prevent some confusion. But for now, this is the worksheet that's associated with Action 9.1.1, calculating your per capita. And I have kind of preceded this with a little bit of data for the town of Ansonia. I have that they collect 6,484, they collected 6,484 tons of municipally generated trash, residential solid waste in fiscal year 21, and 5,300 tons in fiscal year 2020. They do not have a transfer station, and they don't have any other residentially generated trash coming from anywhere else. So that leads us to this gray box, which we don't touch and we don't edit, but it automatically adds up these rows here. And then that converts it to pounds. So what we're going to do now is we're going to go to the Connecticut Partnership for Strong Communities housing data profiles at this web address in line 15. And we're going to go and get the average household size. So I am going to switch screens, and this should work. So there's the website, housingprofiles.pschousing.org. And I'm going to choose Ansonia. I'm going to just click here. And it takes you to the housing data profiles webpage and for Ansonia. So I'm going to scroll down. And so what I'm looking for first is the persons per household. And that's under, let me just go back and look at the spreadsheet here. That is going to be under the population section. In line 16, you can see that it says under the population section, determine your town or city's average household size. So we're going to scroll down kind of towards the middle end of the page. You can see we're passing by some other things that we might end up using in a little bit. Affordability, housing costs, population. All right, so I'm gonna slow down my scroll and get to average household size, which is 2.5 persons per household. So I'm gonna go back to my spreadsheet and I'm gonna put 2.5 in here. Okay. I'm gonna scroll down. And as you can see, I've kind of already done this, but I wanted to walk through it with you, and we'll just make sure that all the what we do now is it matches up with what I did a little earlier. So under number 5, it says under housing, scroll to occupancy status, determine the percent of occupied housing units for your municipality. So percent of occupied housing units, this is an edit that we're gonna make to the sheet. I wanna make sure that it's clear that we wanna use both owner and renter occupied. So let's go back to the spreadsheet and go look on the website, and we're going to go look for housing and occupancy status. So that's going to be scrolling back up. We're looking for housing and occupancy status. Okay. So for Ansonia, we have 53 and 36. So that's 89% occupied. That includes owner occupied and renter occupied. So I'm going to go back to the spreadsheet. I hope I'm not making you guys dizzy. And I'm just going to put 89 in here. And that creates that I put 0.89, but it converted it to a decimal immediately. Then we're going to go back to the housing section up a little bit under units and structure, and we need to start entering in 1 unit detached, 1 unit attached, 2 units. And I will tell you that Ansonia collects for housing units 4 and less. So I'm not going to include anything with 4 units and above. And that's the point that I wanted to make. When you're looking at the community that you're looking at data for your community, you have to think about what your subscription hauler or what your municipal hauler or what your contracted hauler collects from. What type of units does it collect from? And you want to only include those units for residentially generated trash. Oftentimes commercially generated trash, oftentimes when you're looking at 4 units or above, it might have a dumpster or it might be collected by a different truck. So you want to make sure that you're only capturing those units that your hauler is considering residential. So let's go back and look. We're looking for 1 unit detached, 1 unit attached, 2 units, and 3 or 4 units. All right, so I'm in units and structure section. And I've got 1 attached is at 633, 1 detached is 4,036, 2 units is 1,909, and 3 or 4 units is 843. I'm going to go back to the spreadsheet, and I'm pretty sure I triple checked that earlier. I'm just going to copy paste, and that's what you're going to enter in here. And that's going to total up at the bottom for total housing units. And then what happens is in this field, it calculates, it takes the percentage of occupied housing units and applies that to the total housing units, because we really only want to calculate for the number of housing units that are occupied. And that brings us to 6,605 units or homes. Now, I want to point out as well that Ansonia has a contracted hauler, I believe, and they know the number of housing dwelling units that they're being billed for, and that's 5,941. And this little green note here says, if you know the number of homes picked up in your community, please use that number and override the formula. But if you don't have that number, you can go through the exercise we just went through. Now, I will say, you're probably thinking, okay, well, that's not exactly accurate, right? Like 6,605 is a little off from 5,941. But it's better than nothing. And we know that these calculations are never perfect, but we're trying to get the best we can get. And so if you know the number of homes, I would use that. And if, at some point, if you want, we can compare the actual end result of your per capita disposal, and it'll actually be higher for the 5,941 homes, because you're spreading, more trash over less homes. But I think, I guess the message that I wanted to share here was, I wanted to purposefully share that, even though we're going through this exercise and getting information off of that housing website, nothing's ever going to be perfect. All right, so then what happens is you multiply that by the 2.5 average persons per household, and you end up with your residential solid waste generated per capita per year. And this is actually solid waste disposed per capita per year in pounds. And you'll see that in the fiscal year 2020, we had 5,300 tons, and 2021, we had 6,400 tons, and that's really what's driving the difference in the per capita disposal, because of you're spreading the tons over, more tons over the same population. I'm going to pause because I'm thinking that was a lot. I'm going to stop share and just see if folks have questions. I do also have some slides with frequently asked questions that I want to walk through, but I feel like that was a lot, toggling back and forth between the website and the spreadsheet, and people might have questions now. So I'm going to just pause and leave some open space.
Jen, I'd like to ask a question. Why didn't you override the 6,605 with the 5,941? I mean, in this example.
If Ansonia was to submit for 9.1, I would absolutely recommend that they use that 5,900 figure. I think I wanted to just use this as an example to show folks on the call that it isn't perfect, that the system isn't perfect, but it's kind of the best we know how, and we just want to get to the best data that we can. And so not every community knows the number of dwelling units or the number of units that are being picked up from in their community. And so by going through the steps, I think at least shows folks how to do that. But if you do know the number of dwelling units, absolutely, that's probably your best bet. Any other questions for now? Brian Bartram wrote, Salisbury Sharon worked with myself and Pete Brunelli with a lot of the issues in the weeds part-time. Yeah, ICI, institutional commercial, yep. CJ, I'm in and out of meeting because of office, so missed your point. Are you attempting to include all residences, including big multifamily, or just what the city picks up or contracts? So for Waterbury, you just want to include the units that the Waterbury fleet picks up from. So if Waterbury Fleet picks up from multifamily residences, then include that trash in your calculation. If Waterbury, it depends on what size you need to cut off at, CJ. So if you pick up from up to 6 units, you want to include 6 and down. But if you don't pick up 6 and greater, then you need to make sure that that's excluded from your calculation. I hope that helps. 10 units, great. Okay, I'm going to share screen again and walk through a couple of the frequently asked questions that I get from municipalities that are calculating their per capita. So let me make this bigger. Oftentimes we get the question, is bulky waste or other types of waste included in the calculation? I'm kind of getting those questions. Do I include schools or municipal building waste, parks or public spaces? And the answer is no. Try as hard as you can, if possible, to subtract out these generators. If it's really difficult to separate out, and it seems to be less than 10% of the total, then it should be okay. But always footnote your data, make sure that you track from year to year what you're including and what you're not including. But we want to get to the lowest denominator that we can, and we want to try as hard as we can to get just that residential MSW. I know communicating with your hauler, if you have a contract with a hauler, oftentimes you can talk with them about how to parse out the data. I know Manchester's going through that right now, and he contacted their hauler, and they were able to identify that there were certain trucks that were picking up from the parks on a certain route, and they were able to kind of estimate and make some assumptions to make sure to subtract out those types of generators. Is it okay to use the same population data for both years from the census and housing data, even if the population likely changed from year to year? It's a great question. And I think if you have really good population data for your community, then I would go for it. But we know that the census is updated every 10 years or so. So I think it's generally the best that we can do is to use the data from that housing partnership website. Is it okay to include some commercial trash on a route with mostly residentially generated trash? Possibly. The answer is possibly. So I think if you can subtract out everything you can, and including those commercial accounts, if you can estimate the number of stops on that route, the hauler probably knows the number of stops on that route, and you can estimate and make some assumptions and subtract out. That would be the best. But I do know that some communities collect small commercial accounts on the same route with residential waste. And so if they're not able to make that split happen, the commercial and residential split, and it makes up about 10% or less of the total, then it should be okay. Again, make sure you're footnoting and tracking from year to year when you're calculating. And I just write here that it might be just unavoidable to include some of those small commercial accounts. And just understand that your final calculation might result in a slightly higher per capita disposal figure. I think I have one more. In communities with subscription haulers, how do you obtain disposal data? Well, one recommendation is to contact the hauler and ask them to provide a rough estimate of the commercial residential split. Municipality can require that haulers report this data through a registration process, or municipalities are actually required to register their subscription haulers operating within their community pursuant to the general statutes. And within this registration process, you can ask the haulers to report tonnages collected. You can do that on a semi-annual or annual basis. And then, you know, haulers know how many customers they have on each route and how many customers they have from your municipality versus other communities. So they can use that percentage to calculate from the total tonnage tipped at the waste to energy facility. So it's possible. It just might take a couple steps in advance of being able to calculate. You might need to start with registering your hauler. DEP, or the Sustainable Materials Management team, has a lot of information and has done webinars on how to register your subscription haulers. And there are folks on the call who already do that. So there's a lot of resources out there in case you're wondering on how to take that first step. So I'm going to stop share and see if there are any other questions.
All right, so that was
I covered it all, huh?
I think you did. It was a very thorough presentation. So thanks, Jen and Ginny, both. Yeah, I mean, if people have other comments, just come off mute and video and share anything, or if you have experiences using this tool or successes in solid waste management, anything you want to share with your peers, as well as questions.
Hi, it's Jen Heaton-Jones. Sorry, we're sharing a computer. I'm curious as to why DEEP doesn't require the haulers to provide the data themselves in the annual municipal recycling reporting form that is required for them every year to fill out. We, as a region, require the hauler to provide it to us before they're allowed to get a permit and registration, which is state law. And my feeling is, although to some degree I can understand it can be redundant, it would, to me, have more of a checks and balances as to if the data is accurate. And so if I have, let's say, Danbury Transfer Station, which is our largest transfer station, and probably 90% of our municipal solid waste goes through the facility, and that's where we get our data. So all of our data is actually collected through Oak Ridge. We receive a report of every day of every tonnage of every hauler and what they're bringing in the town of origin. So I have all that information in a database, which is great. So I can track every hauler and where it came from. But what would be more helpful for me is if the haulers were required as well in their annual municipal recycling report to actually put their tonnage. Right now, they're only required to put the tonnage in a non-permitted facility or a non-Connecticut facility. But if they were required, we have a better checks and balance to know if, in fact, the origin was from the origin they claimed at the scale house, because often you might have a hauler who has a route that goes through 3 towns and they drop it off and they may only claim 1. Sometimes they'll claim 2, and so it's 50-50, but often the scale house will only put 1. So we don't have complete accurate data, like Jennifer said, because of the way the haulers might claim the town of origin. But it seems to me that we could have better checks and balances if the state required them. So sorry for the long sort of explanation, but also question if you could say why the town or why the state doesn't, and if the state will in the future require haulers to provide that data.
Thanks, Jen. So yeah, in the past, I believe that was required, but Public Act 1087 kind of cut that out of the reporting requirements in order to streamline and to put less burden on folks, haulers and municipalities. We've been having conversations off and on over the last decade that I've been with DEP about getting better data, because I know you're very aware of the data challenges that we have as a state. So it's really hard, it's really difficult to ask the haulers to do anything more than what they're already doing. And so that's why we really encourage, especially subscription communities, to register and get and to require through registration that the hauler reports and what the hauler reports to them. But great question. I believe that we used to, but in Public Act 1087, we took the legislature took that away, and in order to streamline reporting. And yeah, it would provide some better checks and balances.
Thank you.
Kim.
Hi, everybody. So I want to follow up on that comment, that question, which was great, Jen. And I have to say I agree with it, because I do register haulers and I do ask for tonnage, and I don't get it. And it's a lot of work for me to track down the haulers and get it from them. And I don't have a facility that they're going to that I can withhold a permit from. So it's actually, with the change that was made, it's, to me anyway, it seems like it's much better for the haulers, but not good for the towns, at least my town, because it's a lot of work for me to track down that information. I usually go to Deep. I work with Peter, and who isn't there anymore. Now I work with James and try to get that data. So, I guess I like the idea of throwing it out there because it isn't required on that form. I actually think I looked into it, and it's not required on the registration, on the town registration either, where there are some things in the law that are required for that annual registration, but the tonnage was not. So that's kind of an extra thing, if I'm recalling that correctly. But I just want to throw it out there.
I thought the language was general, but
yeah,
sorry,
it's, if we're looking at getting data, it would be so much more helpful if there was some teeth in the law to require the haulers to report it.
I agree. Maybe you guys suggest, as municipal representatives, can you suggest that to the CCSMM working group? Maybe as something to that would really make a difference.
Yep, absolutely.
Not to push it back off on you, but I agree that we need better data.
Yeah,
absolutely.
Thank you.
Thanks for bringing that up, both Jen.
Any other comments or questions? All right. Well, yeah, Jen's
I put my contact information in the chat. I had a last slide, but I didn't put it up. But I just wanted to make sure that folks could reach out to me, or it sounds like maybe your Sustainable CT fellows for assistance.
Yeah, so you've got a lot of names of the fellows and their emails in the chat, and we will post the webinar recording. It'll show up on our Climate Leaders page under the Climate Leaders webinar series. So we have some great ones already posted on managing woodlands and urban forests with some of the others from the DEEP team, using green energy in your business community, EVs, and benchmarking and so on. So please look those up if you're interested, and keep an eye on our calendar. Torrance put our general email in the chat, and thank you all for joining us, and so much. Thank you, Jen and Ginny, for sharing your experience and your wisdom and the guidance on all this. We really appreciate your partnership.
Thank you. Thanks, everybody.
Great. Have a great day.